Let me know when we're all set to start. Ready?
Yep, we're good when you're
Okay.
good. Mhm.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Caruso, and I am a post-professional doctoral candidate at Elizabethtown College. This is my capstone presentation, and it is titled School-Based Occupational Therapy, Incorporating Trauma-Informed Practice into Multi-Tiered Systems of Support for Kindergarten Handwriting Instruction. So how this all started, I'll share our needs assessment results. What we saw was oops, sorry, my screen just went nutty on me. Hold on. Okay, can you guys see my slideshow? Okay, so where this all started and results of the needs assessment. What we saw was a significant increase in OT evaluation referrals after the COVID-19 school closures. Even when kids came back, we saw that they were presenting with gaps in their learning. And even after being in school for a fair amount of time, we saw that students were failing to recuperate skills as expected. The handwriting screenings during school year 23-24 showed that not all students were meeting expectations, and we were really kind of scratching our heads and wondering why this happened. It was very unusual for kids to not meet expectations. So let's talk about what MTSS is. Lynch et al. Proposed that emergent best practice, trauma-informed programming designs for occupational therapists in schools utilize this multi-tiered system of support model with interventions at each level. And if you look at the different tiers, we start with tier 1, which is universal design for all students. Tier 2 is small group for struggling students who are not responding to tier 1 and require differentiated instruction. Tier 3 is for a small group or individual targeted students who are not responding to Tier 1 or Tier 2 intervention and require more individualized support. If you look on this graph on the left-hand side, collaborative consultation is a very large piece of MTSS, and there's a strong recommendation to have clear links to principles of trauma-informed practice. So these are the principles of trauma-informed practice that I use to base my program on. First and foremost, we were looking at safety. Children can't learn if they don't feel safe at school. Once we've established safety, every week we worked on a different principle, starting with trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment through voice and choice, cultural, historical, and gender issues. I also pulled in one of the core essential principles from the National Children's Traumatic Stress Network, looking at staff self-care, in particularly staff who were responding to secondary traumatic stress. So the literature showed that handwriting instruction interwoven into general education showed the best outcomes when collaboration included equal partnerships across all stakeholders. The big secret sauce, as I call it, is to have the teachers have the top-down academic perspective, and then the OTs have this bottom-up sensory motor perspective. And so when you put those two together, you can see that it's the ideal instruction that you can incorporate across all tiers. More important than any particular handwriting program, the evidence shows that consistent use of visuals, terminology, and materials across all tiers really is what resulted in greatest improvements. Now, since the COVID-19 school closures, there's been some research done, and it shows that school-based OT that combines trauma-informed practice and the person, environment, occupation theoretical frame of reference was found to significantly increase students' access to learning, particularly in kindergarten. So this was the goal for my program, was to create guidelines for incorporating trauma-informed practices into all the tiers of kindergarten handwriting instruction. We had two objectives. The first one was to outline best practices for incorporating principles of trauma-informed practice and person, environment, occupation theoretical frame of reference into Tier 1 and Tier 2 handwriting instruction in kindergarten. This was meant to be a resource for teachers to have in order to enhance their practice, and not necessarily in place of, but something that they could incorporate into what they already do in class. The second objective was to determine if Tier 2 and Tier 3 co-designed small group, center-based interventions could support the Tier 1 instruction when we incorporated trauma-informed practices, and thus improving accessibility to learning for all students. As I mentioned before, safety is the first and foremost important principle that we wanted to focus on. And so we waited until week 5 of the program. Week 5 of the program was actually week 3 of school. These are kindergartners, so we wanted to give them some time to kind of acclimate, get used to their routines and establish rapport. And on week 3 of school, which was week 5 of the program, we screened all kindergartners in all classes using the Learning Without Tears screener of handwriting proficiency, kindergarten for beginning print. This is something we do every year, so it's not something that was done out of the ordinary. So it was just something that we were able to use that data in order to inform this program. There was one class, and their teacher is here today. Thank you for being here. Had a subset of students with scores that were too low to calculate a whole class meeting expectations percentage. So if you look at this chart here, this is how Learning Without Tears breaks down the scoring when you do the online scoring for each student. This is one of those students' graph, and as you can see, we weren't able to calculate a total score. So we decided to go with, you see this column, memory on the left-hand side. That's memory for accuracy of letter formation, so we decided to make that our measure going forward. So the Capstone program was 14 weeks, 2 weeks of planning and 12 weeks of intervention. Each week focused on one primary principle of trauma-informed practice. We used the Foundations Handwriting curriculum, which is already used district-wide, specifically level K for kindergarten. And collaboration was scheduled with all teachers in kindergarten during weekly grade level common planning time. So Class K1, I will be transparent. Class K1's teacher is married to an OT, so it helped to get some buy-in. Based on the needs assessment and teacher preference, we chose this classroom to be our primary program classroom. This is the class where we co-taught Tier 1, the OT and the classroom teacher, and it was about 4 times a week for 15 minutes, depending on the classroom schedule. We didn't add anything extra, we just supplemented the already existing handwriting instruction by having the 2 of us co-teach and include the top-down and bottom-up. In addition, we created a small group of the lowest scorers on the screener to receive Tier 2 small group support once a week for 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, and this was an extension of our Tier 1 work. The teacher and the OT collaborated at least 15 minutes a week, 15 minutes once a week, in addition to the grade level common meeting planning time. Class K2, the teacher continued teaching Tier 1 as she regularly does, but we took the students who were the lowest scorers on the screener and created a Tier 2 small group incorporating trauma-informed practice, PEO, top-down, bottom-up, and that group met once a week for 20 to 30 minutes. This group was really intended to supplement Tier 1. It was not necessarily an extension of it. This teacher only collaborated with the OT during grade level common planning time. And this is this class is very unique in the makeup of it this year and in the way that things just ended up falling into place. This teacher is already doing trauma-informed practice within her curriculum schedule, including top-down, bottom-up strategies in both Tier 1 and Tier 2. This was the class that had that subset of students who were scored too low in order to receive a total score at the beginning and baseline. So what we did was we created this Tier 3, very targeted small group, co-designed between the teacher and the OT, 20 to 30 minutes a week, 1 to 2 times a week. It was an extension of the Tier 1 and Tier 2, and we individualized it for students, specifically targeting their first name with title case, but using the same visuals, the same materials, and the same language as the Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction. We did collaborate about 15 minutes a week, and she also participated in the grade level common planning time. Class K4 really did not participate in the program for two reasons. One, the teacher was absent for the first week of school, and it was hard to kind of catch her up once the program had started. The other reason being that 100% of these students met expectations at baseline. Therefore, this ended up being kind of like a comparison group, even though we weren't really doing that level of comparison, where the teacher taught regular top-down Tier 1 handwriting, and the collaboration occurred during the grade level common planning time. Here are some different examples of the activities that we included. This is the Tier 1 in classroom K1, where the OT and the teacher co-taught handwriting instruction in Tier 1. These are some of the examples of Tier 1 activities that we did, where we incorporated sensory motor activities and manipulating different sensory objects and offering play-like activities in order to make it more trauma-informed. As they learned more letters, we incorporated more sensory motor activities, such as putting letters together to make words and using stickers on laminated cards. These were some environmental supports. The teacher incorporated the handwriting into the morning message. We incorporated tactile-based materials into Tier 2 instruction across the board. I love this picture. This student used a finger puppet for letter identification during literacy to combine the Tier 1 and the work that we were doing together. And this last one was just our little small group that did some different handwriting practice with tracing, stickers, and glitter glue. In class K2, the OT only provided support at Tier 2. What we did was we coordinated with the teacher to cover the same letters and repeat those same letters using materials such as Play-Doh, crayons for color coding the lines, foam, and kinetic sand. We also incorporated the handwriting with actually forming words with other play-like based materials such as stickers for creating creatures, and pipe cleaners and glitter glue. Even when we did a fun feed the turkey activity, we included the same type of visuals and supports that were used in the Tier 1 for consistency, predictability, and safety. And this is just an activity that the teacher incorporated to add some more sensory practice into literacy time. So class K3, this is the teacher who incorporates trauma-informed practices already in her Tier 1 and Tier 2. This is an example of Tier 1 whole class instruction. And then this is the materials that she has created in order for students to use during independent writing time, handwriting practice. If you see in this picture, this is how we adapted each individual student's handwriting books using the color-coded lines in order to support continuing with that consistency across the board in all areas. Our small Tier 3 group was a little different. We definitely included lots of sensory motor activities to work on their names, starting with capital case. And we used also different types of handwriting, sensory motor and sensory-based handwriting, such as rainbow writing, writing with glitter glue, and using pipe cleaners. This is my favorite slide because it was really, really important for me to support my staff and my colleagues in our work together. They really went out of their way to allow me to do this project with them. And so safety was the primary point, and I gave them each a menu of self-care for educators that gave them lots of different activity ideas. I also made sure that they were treated with things such as stress relief tea, motivational little trinkets and visual reminders for positive thinking. We also incorporated some fidgets for them with humorous themes in order to help them have those moments of positivity during the day. And then the computer that you see on this picture, that's actually one of the teachers asked me to collaborate with her on incorporating trauma-informed practices for her teacher evaluation goal for the year. And I wanted to incorporate that because that was a great opportunity for us to incorporate trauma-informed practice across all areas of curriculum. So what did we see? All four classes met expectations. That means 100% of all kindergartners at my school met expectations at post-test, which was week 13. That is really exciting. So all four methods of teaching were effective, but we wanted to look at the memory accuracy scores to specifically see the changes or the differences between each of the classrooms. So if we look at Tier 1, when we compare the different classrooms, K1 is the one that was co-taught by myself and the teacher, plus the extension Tier 2. They improved their memory accuracy score. The whole class memory accuracy average score improved 10%. K2, which was just the tier 2 supplemental group, improved 4%. K3, which has the teacher doing trauma-informed level 1, tier 1 and 2, and having the OT just come in for the tier 3, that whole class improved by 26% in their memory average score. K4, which was the class that did not receive any support, we saw 0% change in their scores at post-test. Out of the entire kindergarten pool, which we screened all of them at the beginning and all of them at the week 13 of our program, I pulled out the different students who had participated in the two tier 2 classrooms. So one, the tier 2, that was an extension of my co-taught tier 1, and then also the tier 2, which was just in supplementing the tier 1 that the teacher was teaching. K1 was the classroom where I co-taught, and that particular cohort improved 25% in their memory accuracy scores, and the K2 supplemental group improved 12%. This is the most exciting thing, and I get so excited when I talk about this because the small group of targeted tier 3 support, that small group of kids that at the very beginning didn't even have scores high enough in order to be able to calculate their score, what we saw was a 43% increase in their average score, this particular cohort of students, from baseline to post-test when the classroom teacher owns and incorporates trauma-informed practices into tier 1 and tier 2, and then capitalizes on the OT's expertise for the tier 3 specialized instruction for those particular students who needed extra help. So why is this so exciting? It's exciting because the findings were very consistent with evidence supporting that best results were seen from interwoven teacher-taught tier 1 and tier 2 handwriting instruction when you incorporate trauma-informed practices with the top-down and the bottom-up. And then really we're using the OT as a reference to support those really struggling students who need that particular expertise at tier 3. The tier 1 co-taught group made a lot of progress as well. We definitely saw that it was highly effective and all the students made significant progress. It just wasn't as much growth as the class where the tier 1 and tier 2 was interwoven throughout the week. The class that had the supplemental tier 2 also made a good amount of progress. We didn't see as much growth as compared to the other two classes that had trauma-informed built into their tier 1 and tier 2. Class K4, having no trauma-informed support and no additional OT support, we saw no changes in their scores. However, the whole class met expectations, and that's something to celebrate. So the best practices we created are these. We want teachers to think of trauma-informed practice as a universal design, recognizing that all students may have experienced some kind of trauma, such as the pandemic. Resist re-traumatization by using tier 1 trauma-informed practice so you don't single out students and re-traumatize those particular children with a history of trauma. You want to be mindful that any experience can be interpreted as a trigger to any student. You want to respond accordingly with a calm voice, using consistent language, and offering a sensory option for them to be able to re-regulate and rejoin the group. Sense of safety is very important. You want to provide that through predictable routines and definitely honoring voice and choice. You want to present content within a meaningful context, using both the top-down academic and the bottom-up sensory motor activities during instruction. Provide frequent repetition and practice to foster feelings of success and build confidence, and then offer choices of materials to allow students to have a sense of voice and choice and honor those choices to establish trust. The last 3 points that I wanted to point out as far as these guidelines is that it's really important to encourage peer support through small groups, centers, or partnering. You want to use consistent terminology and language whenever handwriting is involved across all academic areas. And whenever possible, you want to use consistent visuals across all academic areas involving writing. That includes modeling use of those materials and making those materials available for students to use and improve and increase familiarity. What are the implications? So in school-based practice, unfortunately, we have a history of having the OT always carry the sole burden of addressing handwriting challenges. And what our program showed and what the evidence and the literature shows is that really the handwriting best practice is for the teacher to do the tier 1 and the tier 2 and really have the OT support with those particular students who are significantly struggling after the tier 1 and tier 2 support. For school and special education administrators, they need to consider this evidence when making decisions about curriculum and roles of the different professionals working in their school districts. Supporting a joint effort is really important in providing opportunities for collaboration, combining expertise of the team members, as this will result in greater gains for all students. Our barriers. Well, teacher buy-in was a big one. It's really important for teachers to kind of own this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to encourage a teacher share during our grade level common planning time in order for teachers to share their successes and encourage others to try. Time constraints is also a really big one. So we really try to use already established scheduled blocks for collaboration, such as the common planning time for the grade level or students' IEP consults. Also, we tried to just jump into already existing handwriting instruction blocks so that we were just going along with the flow of the class instead of adding something or changing things. The biggest barrier for me is misperception of the guidelines being a criticism or a judgment on anyone's teaching practice. I met with teachers individually and I highlighted that all instruction methods help the students meet expectations. And so no one's doing anything wrong. It's just that certain types of approaches seem to help students make more progress, and I encourage teachers to be a part of the teacher share in order to hear what their colleagues have done. Next steps are to share findings with our building administrators and to share the resulting guidelines with the entire kindergarten team. Work with classroom teachers to co-design ongoing classroom materials supported by the guidelines. We want to review the roster of our Tier 2 and Tier 3 students who are in those groups, taking post-test scores into consideration and making any changes, either having kids leave the group or having new students join in. Phasing out of the Tier 1 co-taught handwriting instruction in Class K1, co-designing permanent classroom visuals to maintain the program progress, incorporating trauma-informed practice across all academic areas. And the big reveal surprise is all the materials I created for this program will be distributed between the 4 kindergarten classroom teachers as starter packs for teachers to have a place to be able to start continuing to use these materials to support their handwriting instruction. My acknowledgments. So many of my beautiful friends and people are here today, and I feel so supported by you. My husband, Bruno, who was my #1 cheerleader for however many years, like almost 30 years of being together. My son, Nathan, who is my Y, he makes me a better person every day. He's made me a better therapist, and it's just a joy to be his mom. My work squad, whoever is here, Jessica, Grace, Megan, and Daniela, thank you so much for trusting me with this and working with me as a team. And my fieldwork level 2 student, Kayleen, I could not have done this without you. It was a lot of work between the two of us, and I'm just so proud. The Lawrence School K grade level team for trusting me with their students. The administrators at the Lawrence School for their support. Dr. Martin, thank you for your guidance and patience with all of my emails. To my mom, I did it! And last but not least, my Peaker family all around the world. A lot of you guys are here. My mentor by proxy, Alice, who's a retired OT and was with me every step of the way. My sister from another mother, Lau, who is not here today because she's working in Mexico. And all my yogi pals, especially my functional fitness peakers and my coaches for always cheering me on to conquer new peaks. So thank you so much, and I will now take any questions.
You can feel free to raise your hand, put something in the chat, or just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your questions.
I have a question.
Yep.
So, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation and great work.
Thank you.
So did you get a sense of the teachers' perspectives about the programs from two things? I mean, I'm sure they saw the results, right? That the kids are improving. And do you have a sense of that they will keep it going? Do you have a sense of this is like it was worthwhile? Was it more work than usual? Can you talk about that from the teacher's perspective?
Sure. Some or any of one of the teachers is here today. I don't think any of them felt like it was additional work. I think if anything, they felt very fortunate, and this is something that they have reported to me. They felt very fortunate to have the OT in their class as much as I was able to be there. This year, we've had an extremely challenging kindergarten group with extremely dysregulated students, and to be able to have the expertise of the OT in these two classrooms in order to be that extra person to offer support or just to say to a teacher, you're doing your best, it made a huge difference. So even though handwriting was the big focus of my program, I do feel that the staff self-care ended up being the most important and most productive part of it, because we're dealing with unprecedented levels of violence, and dysregulated children who are just really need a lot of support. And when they come in without any special education support or anything, these teachers feel like they're on their own. So it was definitely really helpful to be able to have myself and my level 2 student offering that support. I know that they are all super excited to continue this work. And the class K4 teacher who wasn't able to be a part of the program is already emailing me, when are you coming to my class? So clearly all of the teachers felt that this was worth their time. I think the key factor was that I'm not asking them to do anything different. I'm just asking them to tweak what they're already doing. So I'm not giving them an additional curriculum. We're taking what they already do and simply adding these materials. And they're already getting a starter pack where it's like, here, just put this on the table when you guys are doing handwriting instruction. And so it's been really fun. Actually, this has been like one of the highlights of my career, honestly. To be able to do this project has been a real privilege.
Do you think you can continue? Is this part of your role that you'll be able to continue?
So I won't be doing the tier 1 instruction, but what I'm doing is I am sharing with teachers the tier 1 materials that they're able to use. And so that way, when we do the teacher share, we can have each of them support each other. I will continue to meet during common planning time in order to facilitate those conversations of continuing to incorporate the trauma-informed practice. I think everybody sees a real value in having the trauma-informed support because it helps them use that universal design and not single out any particular students. And so I can no longer do that tier 1 4 times a week in the same classroom, but I can definitely meet with them on a regular basis and continue to support, as well as maybe continuing. My tier 2 groups will continue, my tier 3 group will continue, and then I'm hoping to start a tier 2 group in K4 and maybe do some visits where I do some small lessons here and there just to kind of model for them. But that's the plan going forward, because it's not sustainable to have the OT in your class 4 times a week. Actually 6, because it's 4 times a week plus the 2 service delivery for the 2 kids who get OT. So I'm in that class a lot, and that's not sustainable.
Thank you.
May I ask something?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds like this is trauma-informed practice for children, but it sounds like a lot of what you realized was very important was actually trauma-informed practice for the teachers.
Yes.
Is that accurate? Am I
Yes.
reading that
We
correctly?
have found both the program and the literature is very consistent in showing that trauma-informed practice is not about the students. It's about how the adults who are around the students adapt the way that they're doing things in order to make learning more accessible for all students and try to remove as many barriers to learning as possible. And that only happens when you make the trauma-informed practice a universal design and you consider that many things could be triggers and consider how you can respond to those triggers, how you can use consistency, routines. It's been really very much about how the adults tweak their practice as opposed to anything we can do to the particular student. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah,
Robin is
absolutely.
a child psychologist, so I appreciate your question.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. Awesome. Awesome work too, Debbie. I'm very, very impressed. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
Really good job.
Thank you. The last thing is the handwriting screenings will happen every year. So that's not something that's going to be different or special. So we will continue to monitor how students are doing. Last year, we saw a trend where at the end of the year, kids really tanked. One class only had 33% of students meet expectations. And so teachers are very excited about putting things in place to prevent that from happening again.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent work. I'm excited for this for the plans that you have moving forward for it too, which is awesome. So thank you very much. I am going to stop recording and we are gonna